Good evening, and welcome to the Mansfield Dialogue, From Foes to Friends, the U.S.-Vietnam partnership featuring the U.S. Ambassador to Vietnam, J Crittenbrink. My name is Maggie Van, and I'm a junior at Hulligan High School in Missoula, Montana. I am honored and excited to introduce tonight's dialogue, given my role as a fellow in the U.S. Embassy-sponsored exchange between high school students in Montana and Vietnam. As Montanans, we are lucky enough to live in one of the most pristine places in the USA. In our globalized society, it is not only important to appreciate where we live, but to share our role of being a global citizen. Environmental issues ignite a special passion in me, because as a small-town country girl, I know how important it is to work together towards a common goal of environmental sustainability. That's why I feel so honored to be part of this exchange supported by the U.S. Department of State. In his November 1989 message to American youth, Ambassador Mansfield noted, "You are living in a world that is shrinking. The globe is becoming a neighborhood. It's going to shrink further still. We're going to become closer neighbors still. We're going to have to understand each other better." This exchange helps to support Vietnamese and American youth in fulfilling this mission. The Mansfield Center was endowed by an act of Congress in 1983 to carry towards the Mansfield legacy of statesmanship, ethics, and civility in public affairs. Tonight's dialogue focuses on the importance of trust and reconciliation. I'm pleased to introduce our featured speaker, Ambassador Daniel J. Crittenbrink, is a career member of the Senior Foreign Service who has served as an American diplomat since 1994 and U.S. Ambassador to Vietnam since 2017. He has completed multiple assignments related to Asia. Most recently, he was the Senior Advisor for North Korea Policy at the National Security Council, where he worked extensively on Vietnam. He served 3 times at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing, as well as Japan and Kuwait. Ambassador Crittenbrink earned an MA from the University of Virginia and a BA from the University of Nebraska, Kearney. I would also like to introduce tonight's moderator, Mike Hulligan. Mr. Hulligan served in the Army from 1968 to 1971, including 1 year as an infantry platoon leader with the 101st Airborne Division in Vietnam. In addition to work as an attorney, he served in the Montana State Senate for 22 years. He has been Director of Government and Corporate Relations for Washington Corporations and Executive Director of the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation since 2002. Hulligan has earned multiple degrees from the University of Montana, including a BA in History and Political Science, a master's degree in Public Administration, and a law degree. I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Hulligan now to set the context for tonight's dialogue.
Thank you, Maggie. I'm excited and honored to be able to moderate the program tonight, especially given the credentials of our featured speaker. And what I'd like to do ahead of time is maybe take a couple of moments and kind of develop a couple of connections that I have, not only with Ambassador Mansfield, but also with the subject of Vietnam. Back when I was minority leader in the Montana Senate, and I served for 22 years, in 1995, I got a chance to go to Washington, D.C. And I thought, while I'm there, why don't I try to get a few moments with Ambassador Mansfield, who was then had an office at Goldman Sachs. I called the office, and his assistant indicated to me that he would see me in 20 minutes. So I dashed down about 10 flights of stairs, jumped into a cab, and headed to Goldman Sachs, and out of breath. But in the whole time, I'm trying to think of something important I'm going to ask the ambassador, because I can't go see him, I think, without having something important to say. And so I come across something, but anyway, I get there, they usher me in, and it's a classic coffee table with the chocolate chip cookies and the cups of coffee and Ambassador Mansfield. And we enjoy some small talk about Montana politics. And then I proceed to ask him what I think is one of the most important questions he'll receive of that day. And it was, can the Mansfield Center play a role in bringing together the two Chinas, Taiwan and mainland China? And I barely got that statement out when he just about came across the table at me and said, "Absolutely not," and proceeded in a very animated way to discuss not only all the stakeholders, he knew all the names, he knew all the players involved with that and the sovereignty issues, And as he's going through that, I am thinking to myself, now, why didn't I just ask him what his favorite baseball team was, or something like that, you know? So anyway, he calmed down. We had a great conversation, and I even asked him then if he would sign a campaign poster, which he did. I mean, he said, "To my friend Senator Mike Hulligan, with deepest respect," and then we got a picture together, and he's actually smiling in the picture with me, and I don't know whether it was going to be a grimace given what I had asked him, but it was a great little picture. But one of the things that I did during my political career was try to emulate as best I could his model of civility, you know, and just ethics in public affairs. And I put a quote on my desk in the Montana Senate, and I remember it today, that he often used, and that a politician, you know, looks to the next election, but a statesman looks to the next generation when they're forming public policy. And so I tried to emulate that as best I could during my public career. It was looking forward to the next generation and not just an election. My second connection to the subject matter is Vietnam. As Maggie indicated, I'm a Vietnam veteran. And I was a Green Beret, headed to Vietnam, and I got to Vietnam in 1969, at Thanksgiving Day of 1969. And the sergeant major behind the desk said, "We don't need any more second lieutenants in the Green Beret unit. You're going to go to the 101st Airborne Division, and you'll leave on the plane tonight." So that's where I went. And I was a platoon leader in the infantry. So we were on the ground every day. We did ambush and search and destroy. And we worked with the people in Vietnam, in the areas, in the villages, you know, where we operated. And I think we did so in a very ethical way. But during one of those times, of course, there was a firefight. And the next day, with the weapons we'd captured, we had to go back, you know, to the company commander's headquarters to be able to get C-rationed up again and ammo and be able to give them the weapons so that they could proceed to clear those weapons back at Camp Eagle near Hue. As we were trying to do the C-rationing and it was getting later in the day, I asked my squad leader, "Where is your squad that's doing the clearing of the weapons?" And they said, "Well, they're over by these bombed out, you know, hooches nearby." And so it was getting late. We needed to get to our ambush site. So I went over, and as I came around the corner, there was one of the privates with an AK-47 with the barrel against the cement, with his foot up in the air, about to kick the lever of the AK-47. And as he did, the weapon exploded, and all of the cement and parts of that bullet fragment came up into my left side of my face and in my eye. And, you know, that looked a lot worse than it was, but the medic could not handle it. So they put me quickly on a helicopter, and I went to the hospital ship Sanctuary out in the middle of the South China Sea. And an ophthalmologist, who I'd never been to one before, indicated to me, you know, that the eye is the fastest healing organ on the body, and we're going to get all this out of your system, but you're still going to have a tiny fragment of that bullet, you know, in the back of your eye, and it's going to be floating in your eye for the rest of your life. And it still is, and I still see it all the time. Fast forward 45 years, I took my family to Vietnam just 5 years ago with my 3 sons in their 20s and my wife. And we went, and I used the map that I have right here that I used as an infantry platoon leader. We actually found the Phu Loc village, which was near beaches on the South China Sea, and there happened to be a major resort there, and that is where we stayed, just north of Da Nang, about 30 miles. And because of that experience, we got a chance really to spend more time in the rural areas, meeting Vietnamese. We had friends over there who could speak the language, and it was just a tremendous experience talking with them, and they were friendly, they were engaged. The work ethic was tremendous as usual. Everything I remembered, it was even more so as we exchanged, you know, conversation in many of the different parts of the rural communities where we had operated before. A lot of major changes. But one of the things in the back of my mind that I wanted to do was try to find that bullet hole in the cement near the bridge where we had operated. And so the guide that we had took me, about 15 miles away, and we managed to find the bridge, and family was along. They got out of the car, they went toward the bridge, and I was looking at the bombed out shelters that were still there, these old hooches. And I thought, there's no way I could find this. And there was tremendous amount of rubble. So as they were busy doing their thing, I found one that I thought was the one. And after 15, 20 minutes of moving this tremendous rubble and then finally clearing an area where I thought the AK-47 had been fired, I cleared off about a half an inch of dust, and there it was. The same bullet hole in the cement that, as a 19-year-old second lieutenant, that had caused me the injury and the wound back then. And it came full circle for me, to allow that experience, to kind of bring closure to that issue. And it was important, just to be able to kind of end that part of the story. And what I get to do now then is transition to our featured speaker. And one of the most important things I think that Ambassador Crittenbrink brings to the table is he not only exemplifies the Mansfield ethics and public affairs and civility attitude, but also that same attitude of being a statesman and looking to the next generation. So let me introduce Ambassador Crittenbrink. Ambassador.
Well, Mr. Hulligan, thank you so much for that kind introduction and incredibly moving story, and thank you for your service. I do want to respond in detail to what I'm thinking and feeling after having heard your inspirational story. But let me first, before we dive in, just say thank you. Thank you to you, Mike. I want to thank all of our friends at the Mansfield Center, including Dina Mansour. I want to thank Maggie Van for her introduction as well. And for everyone who is listening tonight, for giving me the opportunity to speak with you a little bit about the partnership and the friendship we built with Vietnam over the last 25 years. I also want to give a shout out and recognize a couple of great Montanans that I know, that I'm proud to say that I know. The first is Max Baucus, the great senator and ambassador from Montana, whom I worked for in Beijing a few years ago. He's a great man, a great leader. I'm proud to call him my friend and my former boss. And he also taught me a lot about Mike Mansfield and his favorite parting comment of Tapper Light. So if anybody sees Ambassador Baucus, please give him my best regards, and to Mel as well. And I also want to give a shout out to my colleague here in the embassy in Hanoi, Lindsay Harrison. Lindsay is one of our finest Foreign Service officers. She currently works in our consular section, helping American citizens here in Vietnam. But because she's such a capable officer, we've given her a lot of other tasks, including serving as control officer for some very senior U.S. visitors to Vietnam. So if any of Lindsay's friends or family are watching tonight, I just wanted to state how highly I think of Lindsay, and thank you for sending her over to us. I'm also honored tonight to engage with such a talented group of students, and I sincerely appreciate your interest in learning more about Vietnam and further strengthening the ties between our countries. I had a chance to chat with Maggie just a moment ago before we went online, and I was so happy to hear that she's participating in this great high school exchange program with students from Vietnam. And I shared with Maggie, it reminded me of my own youth growing up in the great state of Nebraska. Grew up on a small farm outside of a small town, and I was inspired by some of the professors that I had and the opportunities to both meet foreign students and travel abroad, and it changed my life and inspired me to become a diplomat. And Maggie, to you and all of your students, I hope you're similarly inspired and find something that really that you're really excited and passionate about, and then that you pursue that. And I commend the Mansfield Center for giving you those opportunities. There are many things I could say about our great partnership with Vietnam. Let me just make a few general comments, and then I'd love to turn to the Q&A session and hear from all of you. I'll say two things at the top. I think as many of you know, in the past year in 2020, the United States and Vietnam celebrated a major milestone, namely the 25th anniversary of the normalization of relations in 1995. It's truly extraordinary, I think, how far we've come in the last 25 years. And perhaps the most extraordinary achievement that we can point to is that today, the United States and Vietnam can sincerely call one another partners and friends. In 1975, we were enemies, of course. In 1995, leaders on both sides made a bold decision to chart a new course. And Mike, I have to say, I was truly inspired by your comments. It's great Americans like you, our veterans, our former warriors that led us back to a path towards normalization and then partnership and friendship. And I thank you for your courage and your service. You know, I think of great Americans like John McCain and John Kerry and many, many others, all veterans who believed that the United States and Vietnam could come back together and find a better way forward. I'm also thinking about another great American veteran who I had the privilege of getting to know in this job, namely the first American ambassador to Vietnam, Pete Peterson, also a veteran and of course, former fighter pilot who spent 7 years in the Hanoi Hilton in Hanoi. And I was inspired in one of my first meetings with him and his lovely wife, V, that I told him in the course of our meeting over dinner that what the United States and Vietnam had achieved over the last 25 years was a miracle. And Ambassador Peterson told me that I was incorrect, that what the United States and Vietnam have achieved over the last 25 years is indeed remarkable, but it's not a miracle because it was not an accident. It wasn't an act of God. It didn't just happen. It happened because people on both sides in Vietnam and the United States with great courage and dedication and goodwill worked really hard to overcome that distrust of the past and again, to build a foundation of trust so that today we can enjoy this relationship that we've built. And Mike, I also wanted to add that it's the great irony maybe of our relationship as well, that it was really the humanitarian and legacy of war issues coming out of that tragic conflict that brought us back together. Beginning first with work that we did together to account for missing American service members in Vietnam. And those issues and our cooperation together is what we often refer to as the bridge to normalization. That got us talking together again. We launched work on this solemn mission to account for every last missing American service member. That cooperation later grew to other issues related to the legacy of war, such as cleaning up unexploded ordnance and mines, remediating dioxin or Agent Orange at various sites in Vietnam, and treating Vietnamese with disabilities of all causes in 8 key provinces. So it really is inspirational for me, Mike, to hear your story and just think of all the courageous leaders, many of whom were veterans on both sides, that worked hard to promote reconciliation and bring us back to where we are today. Beyond these issues of the past, though, I do want to say that today, Vietnam has become one of our most important and most capable partners. This is a relationship that delivers practical benefits to both the American and Vietnamese peoples, and I'm proud to be able to say that today. A few other key elements of the relationship that form pillars in this foundation of the partnership we've built. The first would be people-to-people ties. And I think that building those connections between people, between high school students like Maggie and young Vietnamese students, I think has been vital in advancing our shared interest, and it's helped create a free and open world in which we all want to live. One of our main programs here in Vietnam is the Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative, YSEALI. I think it's a prime example. And since 2013, YSEALI has connected thousands of young leaders throughout Southeast Asia and helped to develop their leadership skills. And of course, the University of Montana's Mansfield Center has been a vital partner from the very start, hosting YSEALI programs that promoted mutual understanding, enhanced leadership skills, and built partnerships between emerging leaders from both Vietnam and the United States. But as impressive as that start was, the Mansfield Center's collaboration with our mission in Vietnam hasn't stopped there. In fact, to commemorate the 25th anniversary of our relationship with Vietnam, U.S. Mission Vietnam and the Mansfield Center have teamed up to sponsor the U.S.-Vietnam Environmental Exchange Program for 50 American and Vietnamese high school students. And that environment-focused program is helping young people in both our countries gain a deeper appreciation of one another's cultures, a greater understanding of the environmental issues that we both face, and is promoting teamwork and leadership skills. And I'm confident many friendships as well. And I'm excited that the virtual component of that program has already started. Now, once it's safe to travel, we look forward to facilitating the participants' travel to each other's countries where they'll learn firsthand about the US and Vietnam's rich cultures and incredible hospitality. And again, I think those kinds of youth-focused initiatives show just how far we've come in the last 25 years. I've talked, of course, about the reconciliation and legacy of war and humanitarian work that we do together that still forms an important part of the relationship. But I think if you reflect on the breadth and depth of our partnership and friendship with Vietnam, it's truly stunning. We partner on everything from security and trade to education and war legacies to energy, health, transnational crime, and much, much more. I believe that the United States-Vietnam relationship is the strongest and the best it has ever been. The United States and Vietnam are more united than ever before in our commitment to promote a free and open Indo-Pacific region, grounded in cooperation and a rules-based order and characterized by respect for the sovereignty and independence of all nations, regardless of size. 25 years ago, our two countries had virtually no trade. Today, we share nearly $90 billion in bilateral trade. For the United States, Vietnam is one of our fastest growing export markets worldwide, and in fact is the 6th largest agricultural export market for the United States. For Vietnam, the United States is its single largest export market. In 1995, there were fewer than 800 Vietnamese studying at universities in the United States, and today, nearly 30,000 young Vietnamese pursue their studies in the US, and they contribute $1 billion to the US economy in doing so. In fact, Vietnamese students constitute the 6th largest group of international students enrolled at US universities. Happy to report that the number of American students in Vietnam has grown as well. And what I'm really confident is that every day we're creating tens of thousands of cultural ambassadors through these relationships, through these study abroad programs that will sustain our relationship for decades to come. In fact, with a population of nearly 100 million people, over 60% of Vietnamese are under the age of 35. And we have a very active public diplomacy program here, and that enables us to connect with this important demographic whose innovative ideas and fresh perspectives will drive not only Vietnam's increasing competitiveness, but I think will also be crucial to the success of our overall relationship. I hope we can get into during the Q&A session many of the other things that we're doing, as I mentioned, from energy to health to the environment and many others. And of course, this is a broad and complex relationship, and we have differences as well, including over vitally important interests like human rights and some of our concerns related to trade and market access. But before we dive into that, I did want to say one word about something that seems to have garnered a lot of attention worldwide, and that's a recent video that I did, a rap-themed video with the renowned Vietnamese rapper Wowie. And I understand that Mike and Dina may show the video here in a moment, but before we do that, I wanted to just say a little bit about why we did this. We did it for 3 or 4 key reasons. I mean, first of all, much of what we do through our public diplomacy activities in Vietnam is designed to explain the United States and the American people and American culture, and also to build understanding for who we are and what we stand for, and hopefully build support for the United States, for our policies, for our people, and even for our products. Secondly, we decided to do a rap video because rap is incredibly popular in Vietnam, and especially with young people. You probably don't know that I do some kind of a TED video every year and do many other kinds of public diplomacy programs. Nobody else outside of Vietnam seemed to notice the other ones, but they noticed this one. And we were happy that we thought if we did a rap-themed outreach program, that it really would get the attention of Vietnamese young people because rap is so popular, and I think we succeeded. Thirdly, we did want to wish the Vietnamese people a happy Tet or Lunar New Year holiday, and of course that was the theme of the video, and again, all designed to promote understanding and support. And then finally, fourth and finally, we hope that this video would open up a new avenue of cooperation and exchange between the United States through the medium of rap and hip hop. And I think it shows the beauty and the power and the attractiveness of American culture in all its diversity. And we try to highlight all elements of American culture. And so that was the theory of the case for why an American ambassador decided to do a rap video in Vietnam. I give all credit for the entire production to my great public affairs team, especially my great colleague, Matt Ferentz. He conceived of the idea, he pitched it, he convinced me to do it, he wrote it, he arranged it, and I was merely, as is often the case as ambassador, the face that conveyed the message. But anyway, I wanted to explain that to you, why we did it. Mike, I'll turn it over to you to show it. I will say that it was very well received in Vietnam, as we'd hoped it would be. We thought it would be. If there was anything surprising about it, we didn't anticipate that anyone outside of Vietnam would actually notice, but it seems that they did. But at any rate, let me just say again what an honor it is to be here. Thanks for your interest in Vietnam. Thank you to the Mansfield Center for all that you do to promote international exchange and understanding. Mike, thank you for sharing your inspirational story. And I'll turn it back to you, Mike, and then can't wait to get into Q&A after that. Thank you very much. Hi, this is J Crittenbrink. Yeah, I was calling about the contest. No, I'm really interested. Okay, I'll be in touch. Thank you. All right, bye.
Hey, Dad.
How are you?
Time for introductions are at hand. Hi, my name is Dan. I'm from Nebraska. I'm not a big city boy. Then 3 years ago I moved to Hanoi. Check the calendar, Tet is coming soon. Kanta and Da Nang are in the mood. Suan suan oi suan dave. Clean the house now, friends are on the way. Grab the Hua Mai and Hua Dao. Get ready to party from Ha Giang to Cam Mau. Tet in Vietnam is the tops. I love the hot spots and hot pots. I drink cafe soda, not cappuccinos. Bring Lisi with me everywhere that we go. Cash for the kids, blessings for the family, love for my parents and everyone around me. Now my been on from mine to yours, from my shores to your shores, our friendship endures. US and Vietnam, from now to forever, we're trusted partners, prospering together. Chúc mừng năm môi from your boy in Hanoi. Chúc mừng năm môi, spread the joy. Chúc mừng năm môi, khắp nơi nơi. Tet, Tet, Tet đến rồi.
Xin lỗi mọi người nghe điện thoại thấy được. Người quan trọng. Hello.
Hey, Lindsay. Hey, how are you?
Hello.
Hey, did you get...
Guys, I listened to the song. Amazing. Good job.
Okay, let's do that. You ready? Okay. 1, 2, 3.
You like it?
I like it a lot.
You like it?
thank you very much. That was very entertaining, and I think you pulled it off. Let's get right straight to the questions. And so what I'll do is there's some that had been submitted earlier, and then we'll go back and forth between some that have been submitted tonight in the chat.
Thank you, Mike.
The first one will be: improvement of bilateral relations between the US and Vietnam is held back by China's likely negative reaction to any large-scale diplomatic moves. How can the Biden administration expand trade or diplomatic relations in any significant way with Vietnam without China intervening to prevent the parties from exploring expanded relations?
Well, Mike, thank you for that. And thank you to whoever submitted the question. Look, what I would say is that, Vietnam is a sovereign country, and I'm confident that Vietnam will make its own decisions about what is best for its national security and prosperity, and how best to advance its interests. And obviously, the United States will do the same. I think it's very clear to me that irrespective of what China thinks, says, or does, that I think the leaders in the United States and Vietnam and the people of both countries have decided that it's in our interest to form a strong partnership and to advance our common interests. I think if you look, Mike, at our interests, if you look at our vision for the kind of region that we want to live in, they are almost completely aligned. We talk about our interests and the region in almost identical terms. We want a rules-based international order that is peaceful and stable. We want all countries to play by the rules. We don't want large countries to be bullying smaller ones. We want to we want to trade with one another freely and openly. I know that some of our friends in Vietnam, some in the media will say, oh gosh, does the United States want us to choose between the United States and China? And my answer is absolutely not. We're not forcing anybody to choose, but we want everyone in the region, including Vietnam, to have a choice and to be able to choose for themselves the policies and the interests that they want to pursue. If you look at issues like the South China Sea, we both believe in freedom of navigation and peaceful resolution of disputes. Again, we want all countries to play by the rules. So I'm very optimistic about the future of our partnership. I know that President Biden and Secretary Blinken have stated very clearly our commitment to the Indo-Pacific region, our commitment to peace and stability in the rules-based order, and our commitment to our partners, friends, and allies across the region. Vietnam is certainly one of them. And I'm confident that our relationship is going to grow exponentially in the years ahead, irrespective of what others in the region may or may not think.
Thank you very much. Let me go into the chat now, and we'll go back and forth. You mentioned the high percentage of young people in Vietnam. How does the history of the war with America impact them, as well as frame their perceptions of the U.S.?
Fantastic question. The most surprising thing to me in coming to Vietnam for the first time, and I've met many Americans who went through the same feelings and emotions, and Mike, perhaps you did as well when you came back after the war. I wondered if there would still be a lot of hostility and resentment towards the United States. I wondered if people would have negative feelings towards me as an American, and I was so pleasantly surprised to find that the Vietnamese people are incredibly warm and gracious, that the United States is very popular in Vietnam. In fact, by our own assessment, we may in fact be more popular in Vietnam than anywhere else in the world right now. We poll well over 90% in terms of favorability ratings. I think it's also represented in the fact, as I mentioned, there are 30,000 Vietnamese students studying in the United States right now. I think Vietnam, being such a young country, may play a role in that the vast majority of the country didn't experience the war era. But I would say that those same warm feelings are conveyed as well to me by people from that generation, and including from Vietnamese veterans. And Mike, I'm not sure how your experience was here, but I know some of the most emotional moving and warm events that I've seen have been exchanges between veterans from both sides. So it's not just the fact that Vietnam is a young country. I think there's something about the Vietnamese character about their long history, about the fact that I think they believe that they face much more serious and long-standing threats in the region, and have had conflict with many others, that accounts for this tremendous goodwill and the friendship that we've built. I think there's tremendous practicality here. The Vietnamese are among the most strategic yet practical people that I've ever met. And I think that virtually everyone I've met here, whether you're young or old, has told me that they believe it is very much in Vietnam's interest to have a close partnership with the United States. There's great admiration and respect for the United States here, even among veterans and the older generation. So I'm very impressed by the younger generation. They're dynamic, they're hardworking. Many of them speak great English. They're all networked. 63 million of them are on Facebook. They often know more about American pop culture and current events than I do. So young people are really driving this country, but I think there's really broad-based support for our relationship with the United States.
Thank you. I'm going to be switching gears again and to a different area. So please update us on the status of unaccounted for Americans lost in the Vietnam War. What kind of research and investigations continue, and how supportive has the Vietnamese government been in supporting these ongoing operations?
Well, the Vietnamese government has been incredibly supportive. So these operations started even before normalization. And if I remember correctly, since the end of the war and since our cooperation together on accounting for every last American, we've accounted for 728 Americans, and there are still 1,245 Americans unaccounted for. The Vietnamese have been incredibly cooperative. In fact, we have teams, American teams on the ground right now, working at sites trying to account for the remaining missing Americans. I'll tell you one other fact to me that is incredibly moving. During the past year, when COVID prevented American teams from coming in to do this work, there were Vietnamese teams that unilaterally on their own carried out search efforts to account for missing American service members. And I think it just goes to show the trust and the partnership that we built. I've had the honor of going out to some of these sites to see the work that's being done. It's painstaking work, and Americans and Vietnamese work side by side to work through a site, to go through literally mountains of soil, bucket by bucket, searching for the remains of our loved ones. And this work, I think, has been incredibly moving and meaningful to many American families. I know in talking to my good friend, Ann Mills Griffiths, who's the president and CEO of the League of POW/MIA Families, that I know she's been a great supporter of this work, and she's told me how much these efforts mean to American families, including to her own. I'm happy to report, Mike, that the great work that continues to go on to account for every last missing American here with Vietnam's cooperation has now expanded into many other areas, including the United States is now starting to provide greater assistance to Vietnam in accounting for its own war dead, of which some estimate could be as large as 200,000 or 300,000. And as I mentioned a little while ago, we're carrying out other work as well related to our past, including cleaning up unexploded ordnance, treating Vietnamese with disabilities of all causes, and also remediating dioxin or Agent Orange. So this kind of work is still deeply meaningful. I think it's very important to the American people and to the Vietnamese people as well. These were the issues that brought us back together and were the so-called bridge to normalization. They still play, I think, a vital part in our relationship. And maybe more than anything, Mike, they're meaningful to people today. They've also helped build tremendous trust, I think, between both countries and peoples. And we're committed to continuing that work going forward.
Thank you for that. And here's one from the chat. How has the growth in anti-Asian racism and hate crimes in the United States affected perceptions of the U.S. in Vietnam? And how has this affected our relationship?
Well, Mike, it's obviously deeply concerning to me, and I think to all Americans, these crimes that we've seen, these acts of hate carried out against Asian Americans, absolutely unacceptable. And our approach here in Vietnam, Mike, has been, when we talk about the United States, we are an open book. We are open in sharing with our friends in Vietnam and around the world everything that happens in our society and in our free society and via our free press. Many people in Vietnam are paying attention to these events as well. And what I try to stress to our Vietnamese friends is that I think all Americans are committed to the ideal of working towards a more perfect union. We know we are not perfect. We know we have a long way to go, but I tell my Vietnamese friends that I'm proud that we are a multicultural, diverse nation, that we benefit from all of our peoples contributing to American prosperity and greatness, and that we're going to keep working towards that. And we clearly have our challenges, and these horrific incidents we've seen are completely unacceptable, but we don't shy away from discussing those issues openly with our Vietnamese friends here. And I think in part too, Mike, I might say, and maybe this is a good segue into some of the other questions that I've seen. We want to try to also set an example for issues related to human rights and how we treat people and respect one another. This is a very important part of our relationship with Vietnam. We do continue to have significant concerns about various human rights issues in Vietnam. We particularly have concern over the number of prisoners of conscience. We have particular concern about crackdown going on right now on freedom of expression, especially freedom of expression online. We're seeing people harassed and arrested for expressing their views online, and we don't pull any punches there. But Mike, we do try to approach these issues also with a certain sense of humility. We raise these issues, and I say this explicitly to my Vietnamese counterparts. We raise these issues not because we think we are perfect and because we're better. We do so because I think for every American, issues related to certain inalienable rights, to fundamental human rights, these are part of our DNA as Americans, number one. Number two, I think that we continue to sincerely believe that the world's most successful, prosperous, and stable countries treat their people in a certain way and succeed through respecting the rights of their peoples. And also, I think that countries of the world have certain international responsibilities and obligations they need to live up to in this regard. I think we should also, though, have the appropriate perspective. Even though we do have concerns here, as I've stated repeatedly about human rights, I think we should also recognize the tremendous progress that's been made here. Vietnamese activists themselves tell me when they meet with me regularly that they're optimistic about Vietnam's future. They're optimistic about the dramatic growth in Vietnamese civil society and civil society organizations and NGOs. They're excited about the expansion of rights we've seen in certain areas whether it's again the operation of NGOs on environmental issues or women's issues, ethnic minority issues. There's been important progress in terms of religious freedom despite remaining concerns, and there's been dramatic progress in respecting the rights of LGBTI citizens of Vietnam. So I guess your question prompted me to give that longer answer in that we think the best way to address these issues is openly, candidly, not to pull any punches, but also to adopt an attitude of humility and civility in doing so. And I'd like to think over the long term that will have the greatest effect. I will say that the many activists that I meet with here in Vietnam, they're grateful for America's engagement on human rights issues. They themselves are optimistic about their own country's future, including the future of human rights in Vietnam. So I'd like us to maintain that hope as well, even as we continue to engage.
Thank you so much for that. Several of the questions in the chat, and Maggie mentioned the environmental issues in her remarks, and you mentioned them as well, and Agent Orange, some dioxins, and maybe some unexploded ordinances. Maybe you could go into a little more detail into how the parties are working together in the U.S. and whether it's taking responsibility and in what way in dealing with those issues, given the impact on the Vietnamese people.
Mike, can I ask, is the question about, is it about these legacy of war issues primarily, or is it about environmental issues more broadly? Or is
The
it
legacy of war issues.
I see.
And their ongoing impacts on the population.
Thank you for that. Yeah. I'm proud to say that the United States made the decision some decades ago that we would engage in activities related to these legacy of war issues to try to remediate their effect in the belief that it was in America's national interest to do so, to support the development of Vietnam, and to build trust so that we could become partners and friends as we are today. I've described in general the main elements of our humanitarian and legacy of war work. The first, and I think still a really vital pillar, obviously, is the work done to account for missing American service members. And as I mentioned now, the work that we're starting to do to help Vietnam account for its own war dead. We have a very large unexploded ordnance and mine clearance program that is particularly active in central Vietnam and has been for decades. I want to tell you one story about the impact of that program and I think why it's been so meaningful and built such trust. In one of my trips to Quang Tri province, I met with the former People's Committee chairman, I guess the governor equivalent. He told me a story, and he's been one of our best partners in partnering with us in Quang Tri province, which is probably the most heavily contaminated province in Vietnam. It was just south of the old DMZ, filled with mines, unexploded ordnance bombs, and the like. He told me even just a decade ago, there were literally dozens of injuries and deaths every year from unexploded ordnance, whether it was people out farming and stumbling upon something, whether it was children finding something and didn't understand what it was, whether it was people who were trying to essentially mine scrap metal and then being damaged in handling these bombs. There was a heavy toll, and the number of people killed and maimed was quite significant in the first decades after the war. I'm proud to say, largely through US contributions and the work that we've done with great partners on the ground, international NGOs and Vietnamese partners, in the last 3 years, there have been 0 incidents, 0 injuries, 0 deaths in all of Quang Tri province. So you can see where we focused in on the most heavily contaminated province and really transformed that area. And now we've expanded our work to Quang Binh province just to the north and to Thừa Thiên Huế province just to the south. So that's one example, and I'm proud of the impact that program has had. For the last several decades, we've also had a program to treat Vietnamese with disabilities of all causes in 8 key priority provinces, and that work is deeply appreciated by our Vietnamese partners as well. And then in the last few years, we've also carried out work to remediate the dioxin and Agent Orange contamination at some major hotspots in Vietnam. 2018, I participated in a ceremony to celebrate the completion of our work at the Da Nang International Airport, where we removed any health threat from this contaminant. We allowed the Da Nang Airport authorities to dramatically expand the size and the operating footprint of that airport. And it was quite a moving ceremony. And now we've launched work at Bien Hoa Air Base just outside of Ho Chi Minh City, which is the single largest spot. And over the next decade, we'll complete that work. And again, I think it's incredibly meaningful and important work to the people of Vietnam, but to both of our countries. And I do want to give a shout out again to many great American leaders who have led the way on this work, but I think none more important than Senator Patrick Leahy, who sponsored the legislation that first supported many of these programs and that came to Vietnam together with 8 other great American senators to help us launch the Bien Hoa Dioxin Remediation Project in 2019. So again, this work, it does remediate the environmental impact and the threat posed by these various contaminants. It's built tremendous trust and goodwill between the United States, which contributes strategically, economically, and in terms of people-to-people relations between our countries. And I'm confident that that work will continue going forward. And it really has made a dramatic impact. And I'm proud to have supported those efforts over the last 3.5 years.
Thank you for your answer to that. We haven't really talked about trade and the economy, and there is a question that says, can you explain the critical ways in which Vietnam's economy differs from our capitalist model and how American businesses have been able to compete in such conditions?
Well, that's a great question, Mike. Well, I think maybe it's more appropriate for me to focus more on our trade relationship than an analysis of the Vietnamese economy. I guess one comment on the economy, though, in 1986, Vietnam launched its Doi Moi policies of reform to promote private sector, to promote the private sector in the economy, to reduce the level of state involvement. And really, it's the start of that reform era in 1986 that has really led to the great prosperity that we see today. The World Bank, this is pre-COVID, but the World Bank pre-COVID had said Vietnam was probably the world's second fastest growing economy over the last decade, and predicted it may be the world's single fastest growing economy in the coming decade. We'll have to see how COVID will impact that, but Vietnam was one of the few countries last year that actually had positive economic growth. And I think much of that is led by the private sector. And that, I think it's not a coincidence that you see Vietnam launch this reform program, promote private sector economic development. It then is one of the many factors that led to the normalization of our relationship. And I'm proud to say that we built an economic and trade relationship today that benefits both of our countries. It benefits American business, benefits American workers, benefits American farmers. Most of America's major companies are invested here, and that investment has contributed not just to Vietnam's development, but to our own. The fact that Vietnam has developed as rapidly as it has turned it into, as I said earlier, one of our fastest growing export markets. I was proud when I was here to host, for example, the governor of Nebraska. When the governor of Nebraska flies all the way to Vietnam to promote American agriculture, something right is happening here. And in fact, as I mentioned, Vietnam is our 6th largest agricultural export market worldwide, our #1 export market in terms of cotton. But you'll see many grains, soybeans, corn, wheat, sorghum, beef, pork, many products. And of course, Vietnam is also a very important export market in terms of aviation. During my time here, Boeing has signed contracts for 200 jets that we anticipate will go forward in the years ahead. Vietnam has great infrastructure and energy needs, and I think American companies and American sources of energy can meet those needs. There are great opportunities here apart from infrastructure in healthcare, the IT sector, and many others. So I really do believe in international trade, because I think it's great for American workers and farmers, and I think that's demonstrated by the export market that we have here. Like every issue, there are other angles. It is complex. We do have a couple of concerns. The growing trade deficit is one concern, but apart from that, we have worked aggressively on a range of market access concerns that we've had here. I'm proud that we've resolved most of them, but there are still others. We work aggressively on that, and we'll continue to do so, because we believe, any relationship that's going to be sustainable has to be beneficial for both countries. I think our trading relationship is, but it doesn't happen automatically. So I've probably spent more time on trade matters than any other single set of issues, and I'm proud from, whether it's supporting Boeing or American farmers or American credit card companies here, the American auto industry, which both exports and assembles automobiles here. I've been proud to support those American businesses and American workers here, and we'll continue to do that in the years ahead.
Thank you. We may have time for just one more question, and it's from the chat. It says, we are very proud to have Montana represented in the diplomatic corps and in Vietnam with your colleague, Lindsay. Can you tell us more about your role as ambassador and accomplishments you have made in Vietnam during your tenure there?
Oh, well, thank you. I'm humbled by your question. Well, first of all, big shout out to Lindsay. I'm a big fan of hers. She's wonderful. Look, I'm uncomfortable telling you about all the great things that I personally have done. Let me tell you about the things that my team and I have achieved here the last 3 years that I'm really proud of. I am proud of the reconciliation work that we've spent so much time talking about today in our chat. That's important and that's meaningful. And apart from the work that we've talked about here, you know, I've been proud to visit, for example, National Cemetery, first American ambassador to visit a martyr cemetery in which North Vietnamese soldiers are buried. I visited 3 times the Bien Hoa or Binh An Cemetery outside of Ho Chi Minh City, where there are 12 to 14,000 former South Vietnamese soldiers buried as well. And through many other activities, including with veterans, we've promoted reconciliation. We've also promoted people-to-people ties, as I've said, in promoting Vietnamese students studying in the United States, Americans coming to Vietnam and the like. And that was part of the reason why I was bold enough to do a rap video, was to try to appeal to the Vietnamese public and hopefully present a positive face of the United States and grow that friendship. But the business of diplomacy is very serious, and we're here to advance American national interests. I'm proud during my first 2 years here. The first year I was here, we grew American exports to Vietnam by 20%. Second year, we grew exports by 12%. Last year during COVID, of course, our exports decreased by 10%, but I think that's for obvious reasons given the global economic downturn. But I'm proud of that, to have been part of major signing ceremonies, as I said, involving the sale of 200 Boeing jets, signings for major investments by American energy companies, and in agreements to export American LNG to Vietnam, and many, many others. In fact, if you totaled up all the billions of dollars in deals signed during the last 3.5 years, I think it would take you north of $20 to $30 billion and perhaps beyond. I'm proud of our security relationship as well. We didn't have too much time to talk about that tonight, but it truly is amazing that now former enemies are partners in every way, including the great partnership between the US and the Vietnamese military. We do provide a significant assistance to build Vietnam's military capacity so it can defend its own national interests, including in the maritime realm, and stand up to bullies in the region who threaten those interests. We've supported Vietnam's deployment of peacekeepers to South Sudan, its first overseas deployment ever. I'm proud that we've worked with Vietnam on the North Korea issue to stop the import of all North Korean coal into Vietnam and to strictly enforce UN Security Council resolutions against North Korea so that we can curb the funding sources for North Korea's dangerous nuclear and missile programs. I'm also proud of the work we've done to advance our common interests in the South China Sea. Mike, there are many other areas from energy and the environment that we could talk about as well, but let me stop by highlighting one other area where we've had tremendous cooperation in the last year, and that's namely health. The US has had a very large health presence here on the ground for the last 20 years. We've helped and we've contributed significantly to building Vietnam's health capacity, including their public health capabilities so they could respond to pandemics like COVID-19. I think Vietnam has carried out perhaps the world's best response to COVID-19 in a country of 96 million people. They've had just about 3,000 cases, I think just under 3,000 cases, and only 35 deaths over the last year. It's a tremendous accomplishment. We've been, and Vietnam deserves all the credit for that, but we've been proud to be Vietnam's partner in helping it to build those capabilities. But perhaps most meaningful to me and most emotional to me is that the Vietnamese people and the Vietnamese government have donated millions of articles of personal protective equipment, other medical protective gear, millions of pieces donated, many more millions manufactured and sold and shipped to the United States. And I'm confident that those donations help save American lives. And that's perhaps maybe a fitting last example of this partnership and friendship that we've built. I always tell my my Vietnamese friends, we of course in English have a saying, a friend in need is a friend indeed. And I was quite happy during our time of need globally facing COVID-19 that the US and Vietnam really helped one another. So Mike, thank you so much. And I know maybe for obvious reasons, we spent a lot of time talking about issues of the past and all those emotional, meaningful efforts at reconciliation. But I do want to emphasize for all of our participants tonight, this is a productive, important partnership today that delivers benefits right now to the American and Vietnamese peoples in all the areas that I've outlined. And it's one of the reasons why I like to tell my friends, I think the job of being American ambassador to Vietnam is the best job in the world. It's been my privilege and honor to serve in this role for the past nearly 3.5 years. I thank all of you for your time and attention tonight, and I'm confident in the years and decades ahead that my successors will continue to build this very important, very productive relationship and friendship we have.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and we appreciate your accessibility and your knowledge of the issues, your direct answers. And now let me turn it over to Dina for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Mike. What an honor to spend time with you. Thanks again for your adroit management of this conversation, and also for your very moving remarks at the top and for your service. I'm very grateful to you.
Well, let me add my thanks to both of you. First to our team at the Mansfield Center, Randy Edwards and Mariah Thomas, who help us in putting on this event. To Mike Hulligan, who is a phenomenal moderator and has always been a great supporter of the Mansfield legacy. We have a number of members of the high school delegation with us today, and there's teachers, Ashley Weinman from Hellgate High School and Nicole Sarrazin Strong from Big Sky High School. But my greatest thanks to the ambassador. It's been a pleasure to hear how you represent the people of the United States and Vietnam. Certainly your comments on humility, on civility, and the importance of building trust and being an open book and acknowledging the challenges we have here at home while still continuing to champion the critical values of democracy around the world. So thank you again. This concludes the series of Mansfield Dialogues for the spring, though we will continue to have dialogues on compelling issues. Look for sessions on the coup in Myanmar, on US-North Korea relations, and on civil discourse. So on behalf of the Mansfield Center and all of us, thank you for attending and good night.
Thank you, Dina. Thank you, Mike. Thanks, everyone.